Elijah Carter didn't set out to be a hero, just a quiet man, working odd jobs, raising his son alone in a cabin tucked deep in the woods. But one cold morning by the roaring river, everything changed. A girl's screams shattered the stillness. A bear's growl echoed through the trees, and without thinking, Elijah ran straight into danger. What he didn't know then was the girl he pulled from the freezing water wasn't just another lost hiker. She was Ava Kensington, heiress to $1 billion empire, missing for 4 months, presumed dead, and now hiding from more than just the wilderness. What follows is not just a rescue story. It's about 3 broken people, a widowed father, his wise beyond years son, and a billionaire's daughter who ran from everything, finding something none of them expected: family, healing, and the kind of love you don't buy, you earn. This isn't about riches, it's about the truth, courage, and what it means to save someone, not just from a river or a bear, but from a life without meaning. So if you believe in second chances, in love growing where you least expect it, then stay. Because of this story, it's one you won't forget. It was just another quiet morning in the mountains, the kind of morning where the frost clings to pine needles and the river whispers beneath a thin sheet of ice. Elijah Carter, bundled in his old flannel and patched boots, moved through the trees with practiced ease. He wasn't looking for trouble, just driftwood to keep the fire burning and maybe something salvageable to fix and sell later. Life out here didn't offer luxuries, but it offered peace. And peace was all Elijah wanted. The world had taken too much already: his wife, his home, his faith in people. So he'd built a new life in the woods, simple and quiet, raising his 9-year-old son, Leo, the only light left in his life. He checked his watch. 7:12 a.m. Leo would be waking soon, probably hungry, probably asking again when they could fix the old radio. Elijah smiled faintly, pocketed a piece of dry bark, and turned toward the cabin. Then he heard it, screaming. It sliced through the trees, ragged and desperate. Not an animal, humans, a girl. He froze, every instinct honed from his military days snapping awake. A second scream, closer now, panic, terror, then a low guttural sound, the unmistakable growl of a bear. Elijah dropped the wood bundle. He ran. Branches whipped against his face. Snow crunched beneath his boots. The sound of the river grew louder, violent. As he reached the clearing, the sight stopped his breath. A girl, no older than 16, clung to a splintered log in the middle of the icy river. Her clothes were soaked, her lips pale. She was slipping, being pulled downstream toward jagged rocks. On the riverbank, just 20 yards upstream, a massive grizzly prowled, foam flecking its mouth, eyes fixed on her. Elijah didn't think. He moved. He grabbed the flare gun from his belt, standard carry out here, and fired once, high and bright. The bear flinched, snarled, and disappeared into the trees. Without hesitating, Elijah waded into the river. The cold punched through him like knives. Every muscle screamed. The current tried to take his legs out from under him, but he pushed forward. "Hold on," he shouted. The girl didn't answer. Her head dipped once beneath the water. Elijah surged forward, catching her, just as her fingers let go of the log. He caught her under the arms, pulled her against his chest, and began the slow fight back to shore. By the time he reached land, he was gasping. The girl was unconscious. "Elijah to Leo," he muttered, his lips numb. "I need you, buddy." Cradling the girl in his arms, he began the long trudge back to the cabin. The snow started to fall again. Back at the cabin, Leo was standing at the window with a blanket draped over his shoulders. He ran to the door as soon as he saw his father appear from the trees, carrying someone. "Dad, who is that?" "I don't know," Elijah said. "Get towels, blankets, warm water, now." The boy moved fast. They laid the girl by the fire. Her face was scratched, her pulse faint. She wore expensive hiking gear, but it was torn, muddy. Elijah peeled off his soaked coat, wrapped her in his emergency thermal, and began to dry her hair. "Is she going to be okay?" Leo asked softly. "I hope so." He checked her pockets. A name tag on her jacket read, "A. Kensington." Elijah's heart skipped. Kensington. He knew that name. Everyone did. He looked at the girl again, really looked this time. Beneath the dirt and bruises, he could see it. The bone structure, the softness of privilege, the kind of face you only saw on TV. Could it be? Could this be Ava Kensington? The billionaire's daughter who'd vanished 4 months ago without a trace? Elijah didn't know. But what he did know was this. Someone was going to come looking for her, and not all of them would be coming to help. He glanced at Leo, who was now tucking a blanket tighter around the girl's shoulders. They'd survived out here by staying invisible. But this girl, this moment, was about to change everything, and none of them were ready for what came next. The cabin was quiet again, except for the crackling fire and the wind rattling the old windows. But Elijah Carter's heart was still racing. The girl, Ava, if that name tag was telling the truth, lay bundled on the floor, unmoving but breathing. Leo sat cross-legged nearby, his wide eyes flicking from her pale face to his father. "Shouldn't we call someone?" Elijah didn't answer right away. His hands moved on instinct, checking her temperature, her pulse, the gash behind her ear. She'd hit something in that river, hard. "We will," he said finally, "but not yet." Leo tilted his head. Why not? Because Elijah's gut said this wasn't a simple, lost hiker story. Because something in the girl's condition, the bruises, the fear behind her unconscious face, told him she'd been running from something worse than a river or a bear. And because he'd learned, long ago, that sometimes the most dangerous thing wasn't what came from the wild, but what came looking civilized. Hours passed. Ava stirred, murmured something. "Elijah," Leo whispered, "she's waking up." Elijah leaned close. Her eyes fluttered open, dull green, rimmed with red. Her lips parted. "Don't call anyone," she croaked. Elijah blinked. "You're safe now, but you need a doctor." "No," she said, voice hoarse. "They'll find me." "Who?" She tried to sit up and winced in pain. "I can't go back." Elijah steadied her. "Can you tell me your name?" She hesitated, then nodded weakly. "Ava." Ava Kensington. Confirmation settled in Elijah's chest like ice. She wasn't just a girl from the river. She was the girl, the one whose face had been splashed across every news channel, the one whose disappearance had sparked rumors, kidnapping, ransom, betrayal. A $5 million reward had been offered, and now she was in his cabin, terrified, cold, hurt. Leo's voice cut in. "You're the girl on the news. Everyone thought you were dead." Ava's eyes darted to the window. "I should be." She told them bits and pieces between sips of hot broth and shivers under the blanket, about the private hiking trip she'd taken to clear her head, the men in ski masks, the blindfold, the basement. But what chilled Elijah most wasn't what she said, it was what she didn't. The names she didn't mention, the fear in her voice when she said, "It wasn't strangers who took me." She looked directly at him. "It was someone I knew." Outside, the wind picked up. A branch slammed against the roof. Elijah looked at the old shortwave radio on the shelf. Dead. The tower had been down for months. No phone, no signal, no way to call for help even if he wanted to, which he realized now he didn't. Not yet. Not until he figured out what kind of trouble Ava had dragged into their lives. That night, Elijah kept watch. He sat by the window with his hunting rifle, staring into the black woods, ears straining for sounds that didn't belong. His thoughts wandered to Leo sleeping on the couch, to Ava breathing softly near the fire, to the flare he'd fired earlier that morning. Someone might have seen it. Someone might already be coming, and if they were, Elijah had to be ready. The next morning came wrapped in snowfall, soft and deceptive. Elijah stepped outside, scanning the tree line. No tracks, no movement, just quiet. Too quiet. He turned back toward the cabin, then froze. Ava's jacket, still soaked, still muddy, but now clearly visible on the inside flap. A hidden tracking device, barely larger than a coin. He yanked it free, heart hammering. Someone knew where she was, and now they knew where he was too. The wind howled through the trees like a warning. Elijah Carter held the small black tracker between his fingers, its blinking red light pulsing like a heartbeat. Ava's heartbeat, a locator. Someone out there had eyes on her, on them. Maybe had them the whole time. He stepped inside and shut the door quietly behind him. Leo was still asleep on the couch, arms wrapped around the patchy teddy bear he'd carried since the hospital. Ava sat up slowly by the fire, her skin still pale but her eyes clearer than yesterday. Elijah dropped the tracker on the table between them. "Want to tell me why this was sewn into your coat?" She stared at it, her face draining of what little color remained. "I didn't know," she said. "I swear. That's how they found me last time." Elijah's jaw tightened. "And now they know where you are again." Ava stood shakily. "Then I need to leave. Now I'm not putting you and your son in danger." But Elijah blocked the door. "You won't make it 50 feet in your condition. You want to run? Fine, but you'll die out there." Her eyes welled. "Then at least you and Leo won't." Leo stirred behind them. "What's going on?" Elijah's voice softened. "Buddy, get your boots, pack your bag. We're heading to the fallback cabin." The boy didn't ask questions. He'd grown up on instincts, quiet, watchful. He moved fast. Elijah turned to Ava. "Can you walk?" "I can try." "Good, because we're out of time." An hour later, they moved through the snow-draped trees, Elijah leading with his old hunting rifle slung over his shoulder. Leo followed with his small pack, and Ava leaned heavily on a walking stick Elijah had carved quickly that morning. They didn't speak much. The woods were alive with sound. The crunch of snow, the snap of frozen branches, the low groan of the river in the distance. Twice Elijah paused and scanned the horizon. He didn't see anything, but he felt it. They were being followed. By midday, the clouds had thickened. Snow fell heavier now, and the temperature dropped. Elijah guided them off the main trail, through a narrow ravine and along a frozen creek. "This way," he said, "tracks are harder to follow along the water." "Where are we going?" Ava asked, breath short. "Old Ranger's shack, 20 miles north. No one but me and Leo know it exists." She stumbled, catching herself on a rock. "Why would you keep it a secret?" Elijah didn't answer. He didn't say it was once their emergency shelter when his wife was still alive, that he'd built it after her accident, when grief made the walls of their cabin feel too close. Some places are for escaping more than danger. They made it another mile before it happened. Ava's foot slipped on a patch of ice. She screamed as she fell, crashing hard into the snowbank. Elijah rushed to her side, but the moment the sound echoed through the trees, they heard it, a low growl, not far, then movement, heavy, deliberate. Elijah's eyes shot toward the ridge, a bear, massive, reddish-brown, emerging from behind the rocks, eyes locked on them. Leo froze. Ava whimpered. Elijah stepped between them and the animal, slowly raising the rifle. "Don't run," he said calmly. "Leo, stay behind me." The bear didn't charge, yet. It sniffed the air, ears twitching, but it was hungry, and it was curious. And Elijah had only one shot. He whispered to Ava without turning, "Reach into my pack, flare gun, top pocket." She fumbled, hands shaking, found it, loaded. "Ready?" he asked. "Yes." "On my count. 3, 2. The bear lurched forward. "Now!" Ava fired. The flare burst into the sky, blazing red. The bear reared up, startled, growled in rage, and then turned, crashing back into the woods. They stood frozen for several seconds, hearts pounding in unison. Leo spoke first. That was awesome." Elijah gave a dry laugh. "Let's not do it again." By sundown, they reached the ranger's shack, a single-room structure made of stone and stubbornness, half buried under snow, tucked between the trees like a secret. Elijah got the fire going. Leo spread blankets. Ava collapsed near the heat, her body shaking, tears falling silently now, not from fear but relief. Elijah watched her from across the room. "You shouldn't be alive," he said softly. She looked up. "I'm not sure I was before now." He handed her a canteen. "You're safe here, for now. But we need to figure out what's next." She nodded. "I'll tell you everything. I promise." Elijah met her eyes, green and haunted but full of fight. "Start with who's trying to kill you." And in the flickering light of that tiny cabin, Ava Kensington began to tell her story. The wind had died by morning, but the forest felt no less dangerous. Inside the ranger's shack, the fire had burned low, and Elijah was already up, boots laced, rifle across his lap. He hadn't slept, not really, not after what Ava had told him the night before. She sat across from him now, wrapped in a blanket, her eyes bloodshot but focused. "My father's company," she'd whispered, "isn't just real estate and hedge funds. There's something else. Offshore accounts, shady deals, people who don't like loose ends." Elijah hadn't blinked. "I overheard something I wasn't supposed to," she'd said, "and then I was gone." Ava's voice had cracked. "My uncle arranged it, the trip, the security, the abduction." She hadn't cried, but the pain in her voice said more than tears ever could. Now, in the cold morning light, Elijah stirred the fire back to life, while Leo dozed, curled in a nest of sleeping bags. Ava sipped hot tea from an old metal cup, her hands still trembling. "I need to find proof," she said. "Emails, ledgers, anything. Otherwise, it's just my word against $1 billion empire." Elijah didn't answer right away. "You don't need to go back into that world to prove anything," he finally said. "You just need to survive." Ava shook her head. "They'll keep coming. I can't let them ruin more lives. I have to stop them." Elijah respected the fire in her, but he also knew what powerful people did to threats. They didn't scare easily. They were erased. Later that day, while Ava rested, Elijah hiked a few miles to higher ground, hoping to catch a signal. He carried the dead tracker, now crushed under his boot, and the radio from the shack, long silent but occasionally functional, static, then a blip, then nothing. He cursed under his breath and scanned the tree line. That's when he saw it, a figure distant, moving slowly. Not Ava, not Leo, someone else. Elijah crouched low, eyes narrowing. The figure paused, looked around, then vanished into the trees. Back at the shack, he said nothing to Ava or Leo yet, but his movements became sharper, his attention more focused. He reinforced the door, rechecked their escape routes, cleaned the rifle twice. Leo noticed. "Dad," the boy asked quietly, "are we in trouble?" Elijah knelt beside him. "We're being careful. That's different." "But you saw someone." Elijah hesitated. "Yeah, and we're not going to panic. We're going to be smart. That's how we stay safe." Leo nodded. "Like Mom used to say, watch the edges." Elijah's throat tightened. "Yeah," he whispered, "just like Mom." That night, while Leo slept and Ava pretended to, Elijah stepped outside. The snow had started again, dusting the forest in a hush of white. He moved like a shadow, silent, deliberate, until he reached a small outcropping above the shack. That's when he saw it. A footprint, fresh, deliberately placed, not by accident, not by a hunter. Someone had been watching, close, and they weren't leaving. He returned to the cabin just before dawn, his boots wet, his jaw tight. Ava was awake, waiting. "You saw them, didn't you?" she asked. He nodded. "One, maybe two. Armed." Ava's expression was calm, but her hands balled into fists. "Then we don't have much time." Elijah sighed. "You said your uncle runs your father's security detail." "He took over when my father got sick," she said. "But it was always about power, control. I was just the last loose thread." "You sure it's him behind this?" "I'm sure. And if I don't stop him, he'll bury every secret and anyone who knows them." Elijah stood. "Then let's stop him." Ava blinked. "You believe me?" "I believe in what I see. And you risked everything to stay alive. That counts." She looked at him, really looked, and for the first time in days, she smiled. Not a press-ready smile, a real one, but outside, in the trees, danger was circling. A radio clicked on. A voice whispered, "Target confirmed. We move at sundown." The ranger's shack felt smaller with each passing hour. The air inside had grown thick with anticipation, and every creak of the wooden floor, every snap of a fire log, sounded like a footstep too close. Elijah sat at the table, eyes scanning a hand-drawn map of the area, finger tracing the route back to their cabin. It wasn't just a home anymore. It was a supply base. Tools, old radio parts, dried food, backup weapons. Everything they might need for what was coming. Ava paced the small room like a caged animal, her arms crossed tightly. The fear that once lingered in her expression had been replaced by something sharper, resolve. If her uncle's men were closing in, they wouldn't find her helpless. She stopped and turned to Elijah. "We will go back today," she said. "We can't run forever. We need a plan, and it starts with what's left at the cabin." Elijah didn't argue. He had been thinking the same thing. The shack had served its purpose. But if they were going to protect Ava, protect Leo, they needed to stop reacting and start controlling the fight. Leo, now wide awake and sensing the tension, helped pack what little they had. He asked no questions, just moved silently from bag to bag, the same way he had after his mother died, like he knew something bigger than him was happening, and he was a part of it. By mid-morning, the trio stepped into the falling snow, Elijah leading with rifle in hand, Ava close behind, Leo shadowing every movement. They stuck to the riverbank, the sound of flowing water masking their steps, the trees offering what cover they could. After 2 hours, they reached a ridge overlooking their cabin. It stood quiet and intact, a blanket of snow on the roof, smoke from the chimney. Wait. Smoke. Elijah stopped short. "Someone's inside," he said, voice low. Ava's breath hitched. "Could it be—" "No," Elijah cut her off. "That fire's fresh. They're waiting for us." He crouched and handed Leo the binoculars. "Do you see anything?" Leo scanned carefully, then handed them back. One guy near the window, another walking around the back. Maybe more inside. Ava cursed under her breath. "They're staking it out, waiting for me to come back." "Which means they think you're desperate enough to do just that," Elijah muttered. "Let's not disappoint them." They circled wide, moving through a slope Elijah knew like the lines of his palm. A forgotten trail, overgrown with pine and rock, led them around the cabin to a hidden crawl space near the back. He removed the snow-packed boards and gestured to Ava and Leo. "In here, quiet." Inside, the crawl space smelled of old dirt and pine needles. Leo kept close to Ava, who held his hand tight as Elijah crept through the access door into the kitchen pantry. Voices echoed through the cabin, muffled but close. 2 men, maybe 3, talking about coordinates, movement, scanning equipment. They're tracking more than her now. They're tracking anyone who helps her. Elijah reached for the loose floorboard under the old stove. From beneath it, he pulled a wrapped canvas bundle, his emergency kit. Flares, a combat knife, 2-way radios, and a weatherproof map marked with safe zones from years past. He moved like a ghost, inching to the living room, crouched behind the old bookcase. He saw them. One stood near the fire, arms crossed, military stance. The other paced with a walkie clipped to his chest. Status report from the ridge came through. "She's close. They'll move at dusk." A third man entered from the hall, sipping coffee from Elijah's own chipped mug. That was enough. Elijah rose. "Evening's cancelled," he growled. The men turned, too slow. With a single motion, Elijah fired a warning shot into the ceiling, then stepped forward with cold precision. "Drop it!" Now, the pacing man reached for his radio. Elijah fired again, this time shattering the walkie on his chest. "You're not calling anyone," Elijah said. They hesitated, then slowly raised their hands. From behind him, Ava emerged, Leo still hidden. "You're trespassing," Elijah continued, stepping closer. "And this isn't a ransom job anymore. This is hunting. That makes it personal." The man by the fire spoke. "You don't know who you're messing with." "I do," Elijah replied. "And you're not enough." He motioned toward the door. "Outside. Now you tell your boss if he wants a war, he's got one. But if he wants his niece to testify instead of vanish forever, he'd better think twice." The men hesitated. Now they backed away and disappeared into the snow-covered woods. Elijah shut the door behind them, locked it, and turned to Ava and Leo. "We won the hour," he said quietly. "Now let's win the day." And with the fire roaring again, they began to plan for war, for truth, and for something even more dangerous than either, justice. The cabin was theirs again, but it no longer felt like home. Not to Elijah, not to Leo, and certainly not to Ava. The men who had occupied it had left behind more than cold coffee and boot prints. They'd shattered the illusion of safety. Outside, the snow kept falling, thick, quiet, deceptively peaceful. Inside, Elijah nailed the back door shut, rechecked the locks, pulled blackout curtains over every window. Every sound outside made him pause. Every creak made Leo flinch, and Ava just sat by the fireplace, silent, her eyes fixed on the flames. She hadn't said much since the standoff. Not since she saw those men, her uncle's men, sipping coffee from a mug her mother might have once used. She looked smaller now, curled into herself, like if she just stayed still enough, the danger might pass. But Elijah knew better. It never passed. It only paused. Leo, sensitive in that way only kids with scars often are, padded over and sat beside her. "You okay?" he asked softly. Ava didn't look at him, just nodded once. Leo reached into his pack and pulled out his sketchbook. He flipped to a fresh page and began to draw. Quiet, no pressure, just presence. Elijah watched from the kitchen. It struck him, not for the first time, how much Ava reminded him of his wife in these early hospital days. Strong, brave, but carrying too much alone. He set a mug of tea down beside her. "Drink," he said. No arguments. She looked up and gave the faintest smile. "Thanks." That night, Elijah worked by lantern light, rewiring the broken radio with parts from an old generator he'd salvaged last fall. It wasn't perfect, but it might be enough. Ava sat nearby, finally speaking again. "You really think we can get a signal out?" "If we can catch a skip, maybe," Elijah replied. "There's a ranger station 20 miles north. If someone's on duty, they'll hear us. And if they're not, then we move. Before they come back." She was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Why are you helping me?" Elijah didn't look up. "Because someone should have. Before this." She watched him work. "You don't know me. You could have left me in that river." "I've buried enough people," Elijah said. "Don't plan on doing it again." Silence stretched between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was honest. The next day, Ava helped Leo with his reading lessons, while Elijah checked the perimeter. No tracks, no movement, just wind. Back inside, Leo looked up from his book. "Do you think they'll try again?" Elijah glanced at Ava, then back at his son. "Yes, but we'll be ready." Leo nodded solemnly. "We should name the bear." Ava blinked. "The bear." "Yeah," Leo said, "like a code name, so we know what we're talking about, in case someone's listening." Ava laughed softly, the sound brittle but real. "How about Mr. Trouble?" Leo grinned. "Perfect." Even Elijah cracked a smile. That evening the radio came to life. Just a crackle, a distant voice, barely a whisper. "Harbor Station. Do you copy?" "Repeat. Low priority rescue request." Elijah grabbed the mic. "Harbor, this is Carter, remote cabin, Sector 9. We've got a high-risk individual in danger. Confirm receipt." Silence, then, "Carter, say again. Did you say high risk?" "Copy. Repeat. VIP extraction. Compromised position. Please advise." There was a pause. "Coordinates?" the voice asked. Elijah hesitated. Too much trust could be fatal. "Not yet," he said. "Prove you're friendly first." Another pause. Then the voice replied. "Code response, Winterglass protocol. You want to rescue Carter, you'd better keep your girl warm. Help is coming." The line went dead. Ava stared at Elijah. "That was them, wasn't it?" Elijah nodded slowly. "Yeah. But which ones? They couldn't risk staying long. The message was either hope or bait. Either way, it meant one thing. They weren't hidden anymore." Elijah packed the essentials: food, fire starter, first aid, spare ammo. He handed Ava a revolver and gave Leo the old compass he used to carry in his jacket. "Where are we going?" Leo asked. "Someplace no one thinks to look," Elijah answered. Ava stood steady now. "Back to the river." Elijah nodded. "That current tried to kill you once," he said, "but it might just save us this time." They left the cabin under cover of darkness, snow falling in sheets. Behind them, the only home they'd known for years stood silent, but ahead, a wild, uncertain future. and maybe, just maybe, a chance to finally stop running. By the time the sun rose over the mountain ridge, Elijah, Ava, and Leo were already miles away from the cabin. The riverbank shimmered with frost, and every breath came out in clouds. They moved fast, with purpose, trusting Elijah's memory of forgotten trails and hidden switchbacks. None of them spoke much. The danger wasn't behind them, it was all around. Somewhere in the shadows of the trees, people were looking, tracking, hunting, but they weren't just after Ava anymore. They were after anyone who helped her. They followed the river until they reached a hollow under a rocky outcrop where Elijah once taught Leo to fish. The place was overgrown now, half frozen but defensible, safe enough to stop and rest. Leo collected kindling while Ava crouched by the water, cupping it in her palms, staring at her reflection like it belonged to someone else. She looked thinner now, sharper, like all the softness had been peeled away by fear and frost. Elijah built a fire and handed her a protein bar. "Eat, you'll need your strength." She took it wordlessly, then pulled something from her pocket, a folded newspaper crumpled and damp. Leo peered over her shoulder. "That's you," he said. Ava nodded. Her photo stared back at them from the front page. The headline screamed in bold, "Missing Kensington heiress presumed dead. Reward raised to 10 million. There was another picture below, younger, smiling, polished, a stark contrast to the bruised, exhausted girl by the river. "I didn't even recognize myself," she said. "That's not who I am anymore." Elijah looked at the article, then at her. "Who were you then?" She hesitated. "A face, a symbol, my family's next generation, groomed for interviews, charity balls, mergers I didn't even understand. Every step of my life is planned. Every word was rehearsed. And now I'm someone who crawled through snow and mud and nearly drowned twice just to find a little freedom." Leo studied the photo again. "You look happier now," he said. Ava's smile was faint but real. "I feel more real now than I ever did at home." Elijah stirred the fire. "Your family's still looking. With money like that, they'll never stop." Ava's jaw clenched. "It's not my father. He's sick. He wouldn't even know how to do this. It's my uncle. He wants control of the company. If I'm gone, he gets it all. If I'm alive, I'm the problem. So he turned you into a missing person." She nodded. "I heard them talking before I escaped. The plan wasn't ransom, it was removal. Clean, quiet. I was never supposed to be found." Elijah leaned back against the rocks. "Well, they messed up, because you were found." Leo looked up from his sketch pad. "Does that mean we're going to tell the news to people now?" "Not yet," Elijah said. "First, we need to get proof, and that means we can't be ghosts anymore." Ava took a shaky breath. "Then we go to the media. But on our terms." Elijah nodded. "We give them something too big to spin, too real to bury. We make it so even your uncle can't shut it down." "And how do we do that?" "We tell your story, every piece of it, but we start with one thing they never expected." "What?" "You are alive." They sat by the fire, the newspaper laid out in the dirt, the frozen river whispering beside them. Somewhere, powerful people were still crafting statements, adjusting reward figures and preparing eulogies. But Ava Kensington wasn't dead. She was here, alive and ready to fight. Hours later, in a nearby mountain town, a blurry security camera captured grainy footage of a young woman with tangled hair and a familiar jawline slipping into a public library. Within 24 hours, that footage was everywhere. News anchors starred in stunned silence. Press conferences were canceled. The Kensington family released a brief statement. We are cautiously hopeful and cooperating fully with authorities. But behind the scenes, panic bloomed because the girl who was supposed to disappear had returned. And this time, she wasn't alone. The moment Ava's image flashed across television screens, the world shifted. Not just for her, but for Elijah and Leo, too. They were no longer shadows moving quietly through the trees. They were visible now, and visibility, Elijah knew, was a kind of danger all its own. They stayed hidden in the woods outside the town, camping near an abandoned hunting shed Elijah had used years ago. Supplies were thin, the air grew colder, but Ava was different now, sharper, focused. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was preparing. That night, around the fire, Ava asked for Elijah's phone. He handed it to her reluctantly. Reception was weak, but it was enough. She typed slowly, deliberately, and then pressed send. A single email sent to the only journalist she'd ever trusted, a woman named Claire Harrow, who had once exposed corruption in a pharmaceutical giant, even when it meant burning bridges. The subject line was simple: I'm alive. Within minutes, Claire responded, cautious, skeptical, desperate for confirmation. Ava attached the selfie Leo had snapped of the three of them beside the river, all bundled in winter gear. Her face, though bruised and tired, was unmistakable. Claire called within the hour. Ava answered on speaker. Her voice was quiet but clear as she said, I'm ready to tell the truth, all of it. They arranged to meet Claire just before dawn in a remote rest stop, an hour outside the town. Elijah drove an old truck Leo and he had rebuilt over the summer, its heater wheezing, the windshield smeared with frost. Ava sat in the back, hoodie up, staring out into the dark trees. Her eyes never stopped moving. Claire arrived alone, as promised, stepping out of a battered SUV with a heavy coat and a worn leather satchel. She looked older than Ava remembered, but her eyes were just as sharp. The first thing she said wasn't hello. She said, Is it really you? Ava stepped forward, lowered her hood. It's me. Claire let out a breath like she'd been holding it for years. They sat in the diner across the parking lot, lights dim, coffee lukewarm. Ava spoke first. She told Claire about the fake hiking trip, the men in masks, the windowless room, the escape, her uncle's voice on the phone. Claire didn't interrupt. She just scribbled notes and nodded occasionally. Then Ava said, He wanted me gone, and now he's going to come for anyone who helps me. Claire leaned in. Let him, but we'll make sure the world's watching. When they parted ways, Claire had copies of the photos Ava had taken during her captivity, blurred shots of license plates, equipment brands, even a glimpse of her uncle's driver. It wasn't everything, but it was enough. Enough to start a war, enough to make them dangerous. Back in the forest, things changed. Ava was no longer just a girl rescued from a river. She was the center of a storm. Her story was going public. Her face was on every screen, and people were choosing sides. Some called her brave, others called her a liar. Elijah watched it unfold on the small TV in the gas station where he bought supplies. He didn't like how many people were talking about them, about Ava, about him. Headlines like Mountain Man Saves Heiress and Runaway Billionaire Daughter or Hoax. It made him want to disappear all over again, but Leo didn't see it that way. She's like a superhero, he said proudly, showing off a drawing of Ava with a cape. And you're the sidekick. Elijah chuckled. Think I'm too old for a sidekick? Fine, Leo said. Then you're the mentor, the one who teaches her how to be strong. Elijah thought about that. Maybe Leo was right. Maybe what Ava needed wasn't saving anymore. Maybe she just needed someone to believe in her, while the rest of the world decided whether to trust her. That night, as they sat by the fire, Ava looked at Elijah and said, "You could walk away now. No one would blame you." Elijah met her eyes. "You're not a problem I want to walk away from." And just like that, something changed. Not the danger, not the mission, but the trust. It stopped being survival and started becoming something more. The first snowstorm of December rolled in like a freight train, hammering the forest with ice and wind. The hunting shed groaned under the weight of snow on its roof, and even the fire inside seemed reluctant to stay lit. But Elijah, Ava, and Leo had learned how to adapt. They were quiet now, a unit, not perfect, but practiced. Ava no longer flinched at every branch crack outside the cabin. She'd started helping with firewood, even sharpened the knives Elijah used for carving. She asked questions about tools, about knots, about how to track in the snow, skills she never needed in her old life. Now she treated them like lifelines. And Elijah, he watched, not just to protect but to understand. Ava wasn't like anyone he'd ever met. She had the polish of wealth, but the instincts of someone who had lost too much to take anything for granted. At night, when Leo fell asleep to the sound of wind through the trees, Elijah and Ava would talk, quietly, honestly, about her father who she hadn't seen since before the trip, about his wife, Maria, and the illness that had hollowed out their life, about being broken by grief and still getting up the next morning because someone small was counting on you. It was one of those nights, storm raging outside, Leo curled up by the fire, when Ava said something that stayed with Elijah long after the wind had died down. "Everyone always thought I had everything, but it was all built for me, not by me. This place, these moments, they're mine. I've earned them." She hesitated. "I've never earned anything before." Elijah stirred the fire, not looking at her. "You've earned more in these woods than most people do in a lifetime of boardrooms." There was a long pause, a warmth in the silence that didn't come from the flames. Then Ava smiled, the first real one he'd seen in days. "Even Leo trusts me now," she said, half laughing. "He told me I could hold the compass." "That's serious business," Elijah replied. "Took me 2 months just to touch the thing." They both laughed, and for a moment, the world outside the cabin didn't exist. No bounty hunters, no corporate corruption, no betrayal, just firelight. And something starting to take root between them, something cautious, something unspoken, but real. But trust is fragile, and theirs was about to be tested, because a mile downriver, half buried in snow, a broken tracking drone blinked its final red light, long enough to send one last signal, a signal someone had been waiting for, someone who now knew exactly where they were. The morning after the storm broke crisp and quiet, the sky a pale wash of winter blue. Snow blanketed everything in hushed stillness. It was the kind of morning Elijah might have once called beautiful, before the world had changed, before danger started lurking beneath the surface of peace. Leo was the first to stir, his small boots crunching on the hardened floorboards as he peeked outside. "Fresh tracks," he whispered, eyes wide. "Big ones." Elijah was beside him in a heartbeat, his breath steaming in the air as he scanned the tree line. Sure enough, prints in the snow, deep, heavy, unevenly spaced, not boots, paws. He followed them out far enough to see the full story. The prince had circled the shed sometime during the night, veering toward the stacked firewood before retreating into the forest. Claw marks scratched into the side of the cabin just low enough to be a warning, not an attack. Elijah's stomach sank. "It's the bear," he muttered. Ava appeared behind him, pulling her coat tighter. "The same one?" she asked. Elijah nodded. "Same gait, same size. It remembers." He didn't have to explain. Ava knew. She remembered the first attack, the river, the growl, the water so cold it felt like fire, and the flare gun that had saved them both. "What do we do?" she asked. Elijah scanned the tree line again. "Hope it keeps moving, but prep like it won't." Back inside, they readied the cabin. Elijah showed Ava how to secure the food in metal containers. Leo was in charge of flare rounds. They brought in more firewood, reinforced the door with the last of the nails, and cleared snow from the narrow escape path Elijah had dug behind the shed. But the tension wasn't just about the bear. Ava knew it. So did Elijah. Something felt off. The air was too still, the world too quiet, and deep in Elijah's gut, something twisted. This wasn't just an animal circling its old hunting ground. It was a message. "They're getting closer," Ava said finally, watching the woods from the window. Elijah didn't deny it. He had seen the blinking light in the snow that morning, right before it died. He hadn't told Ava or Leo, not yet. He wasn't ready to put that weight on them. Later that afternoon, while Leo worked on his drawings, Ava stepped outside to catch her breath. The snow was knee-deep now, and the world smelled clean and sharp. She walked down to the river's edge, the current frozen over in places, still running beneath in others. She stood there, thinking about what her life used to be, what it had become. She didn't hear the rustling behind her until it was too late. The bear. It stood 20 feet away, massive and still, steam rising from its nostrils. Its eyes locked onto hers, unblinking. Ava froze. She didn't run, didn't scream. She remembered Elijah's words. "Don't turn your back. Don't show fear." But fear was rising fast, thick and choking. Then another sound, not from the bear, from beyond the trees. A crunch of snow, a figure moving, a second presence, not an animal, a man. Ava's breath caught. The bear startled, its head turning sharply at the sound, and then, miraculously, it retreated, growled once and slipped into the trees like a ghost. Ava stood there, stunned, heart pounding. She turned toward the noise behind her. No one, just snow and silence. She walked slowly back to the cabin, her hands trembling as she opened the door. Elijah looked up. "You're pale. What happened?" Ava stared at him. "It came back," she said. "The bear. It could have attacked me, but it didn't." Elijah frowned. "That's strange." She nodded. "But there was something else. Someone else." He stepped forward. "Are you sure?" "No," she said, "but I felt it, like we were being watched." Elijah's face darkened, because deep down he'd felt it too. Whatever was hunting Ava wasn't finished, and the wild was no longer the only predator in these woods. That night, as wind rattled the hunting shed and firelight danced across the wooden walls, Elijah made a decision. He waited until Leo was asleep, then motioned for Ava to follow him to the back of the shed. Tucked beneath a pile of old hunting gear and tarp was a dented metal case. Ava watched silently as he knelt, flipped the rusted clasps, and opened it. Inside, a shortwave radio, dusty but intact, a tangle of cables, a cracked headset, and a small spiral notebook. "I built this years ago," Elijah said, running a hand over the radio. back when going off-grid felt like freedom instead of survival. "Does it work?" Ava asked. "Sometimes. Depends on the air, the timing, luck." He connected wires, tapped the case, and adjusted the frequency knob with care. Static filled the cabin. Then a burst of garbled voices. Then nothing. Elijah frowned. Ava leaned closer. "Why now?" He hesitated. "Because we're not going to last out here forever, and because someone's going to need to know the truth." They spent the next hour cycling through frequencies. Ava scanned Elijah's notebook, filled with dates, call signs, and notes about reception quality over the years. It wasn't random, it was methodical, strategic. She glanced at him. "You used to be someone else, didn't you?" He didn't answer, but the look in his eyes told her enough. Elijah Carter hadn't always been just a handyman and a father. He'd been trained, and he'd walked away from something that had left its mark. Now he was walking back toward it. For her. The next morning the air was brittle with cold, the kind of cold that settled in your bones and stayed there, while Elijah checked perimeter traps and Leo practiced building a fire on his own. Ava sat alone by the river, knees pulled to her chest. She was remembering, not the woods, not the escape, but before. Back when she was Ava Kensington, the girl in designer coats and chauffeured cars, the face of a future she never chose. Her father, before he fell ill, had always been kind, distant but gentle. Her mother had been a master of appearances, publicly polished, privately cold. It was her uncle Victor who had always hovered, always watched, always smiled a little too tightly when her father wasn't looking. He'd taken over the company when her father grew too weak to attend meetings. He said it was temporary. That family came first. But family didn't send you on a fake retreat and disappear you into the woods with strangers and lies. Family didn't plan your obituary. Ava remembered the moment she'd realized it wasn't a kidnapping, that there was no ransom demand, that no one was looking for her. She'd stopped screaming that day and started surviving. She didn't realize Elijah had returned until he sat beside her. "You don't talk much about what happened before." "There's not much worth saving," she said softly. "I don't believe that." She looked at him, his face weathered by cold and life. "How do you do that?" she asked. "Believe in people." He smiled faintly. "I've got a kid who sees the best in everyone. Makes it hard not to try." Ava watched the water, ice flowing slowly across the surface. "Then maybe I want to try too." They heard the gunshot just before dusk. It echoed through the trees, sharp, distant, deliberate. Elijah dropped the pot of boiling water, already reaching for the rifle. Leo froze. Ava's face went white. "That wasn't random," Elijah said. "That was a signal." They moved fast. Ava grabbed Leo's coat. Elijah loaded rounds with a calmness that didn't match the urgency in his eyes. By the time they were packed and ready, the sky had gone dark. Snow began to fall again. Elijah led them through the trees, staying low, avoiding old trails. But even as they moved, he knew they were no longer ahead of the danger. They were being pushed, herded. He stopped at a rocky ridge, crouched low, motioned for silence. Below, in a clearing dimly lit by moonlight, he saw them. 3 figures, all armed, dressed in dark winter gear, and one of them carried something blinking in his hand. Another tracker. They were close. Too close. Elijah didn't breathe. Leo squeezed Ava's hand. Then, through the cold silence, came a second sound, a snarl, deep, familiar. The bear! But not just the bear. The distraction Elijah hadn't known he needed. The predator that had been hunting them now hunted someone else. And in that chaos, Elijah saw their chance. He turned to Ava, to Leo, voice barely a whisper. "Now we run!" The forest erupted into chaos. A guttural roar split the air as the bear barreled into the clearing below, a blur of muscle and fury. One of the men screamed, slipping in the snow as the beast lunged. The others opened fire, the staccato blasts of rifles echoing through the trees like thunder. Elijah didn't wait to see who survived. He grabbed Ava's hand, pulled Leo close, and ran. They tore through the woods, branches whipping against their faces, boots sliding across patches of ice. The sounds of the fight behind them faded, swallowed by wind and distance, but the danger hadn't passed. If anything, it had only grown more desperate. Elijah led them down a ravine, past frozen thickets and over a shallow stream. He knew these woods, knew every twist and rise, but even he couldn't predict what came next. Ava stumbled. She cried out, but caught herself, breath heaving in cold bursts. "I'm fine," she gasped. "Keep going." Leo was holding up better than expected, determined, fear buried beneath instinct. He didn't cry, didn't ask questions, just ran. Elijah found them a hollow beneath a rocky overhang, hidden by low branches and a thick drift of snow. It wasn't perfect, but it would give them a moment, just one, to regroup. They ducked inside, breathless, hearts pounding. Snow clung to their hair and lashes. The cold was merciless. "I saw the tracker," Ava whispered. "They have another one." "I know," Elijah said. "They're not just following prints. They're locking in on you. They must have planted more than one." Ava cursed under her breath, pulling off her jacket and digging into the seams. She found it near the lining, barely the size of a thumbnail, taped in black against black. Impossible to see unless you knew where to look. She crushed it between two rocks and hurled the pieces into the snow. "Will that stop them?" Leo asked quietly. Elijah looked at the boy and gave the only honest answer he could. For a while, gunfire cracked again in the distance, closer this time. Not panic shots, warning shots. They weren't firing at the bear anymore. They were back on the trail. Ava looked at Elijah. "We can't keep running, not like this." "I know. So what do we do?" Elijah didn't respond immediately. His mind turned through possibilities, routes, caches, backup plans. "We shift the game," he said finally. "No more hiding. We go where they don't expect us." Ava frowned. "Where's that?" He looked at her, eyes steady. "Home." It took a beat for her to understand. The cabin. They'd burned the flare, fought the bear, evaded armed men, and fled into the woods. But now Elijah wanted to go back to the place they'd barely escaped days before. "They think we're too scared to return," he said. "That we're prey. But that's where we turn the tables." Ava stared at him, then slowly nodded. "Then let's give them what they never saw coming." Elijah leaned toward the edge of the overhang, peering into the darkness. Snow still fell steadily. Their footprints would be gone by morning. They had the night, maybe less. He turned to Leo. "You up for one more run, buddy?" Leo's chin lifted. "I'm not afraid." Elijah smiled faintly. "Good," he said, because this time we fight back. By the time they reached the outskirts of the clearing near the cabin, dawn was beginning to break, soft gray light filtering through the trees, casting long shadows on the snow. Smoke already hung in the air. Ava smelled it first. Elijah! He held up a hand and crouched low, pulling Leo behind him. They crawled through the underbrush, leaves and snow crunching under their weight. Then they saw it. The cabin. Flames danced through the windows, devouring the wooden frame they'd once called safe. The fire hadn't just started, it had been set, deliberately controlled, the kind of fire that erases everything. Ava stared in disbelief. It wasn't just a building, it was everything they'd built together. The quiet nights, the stories, the drawings on the wall Leo had made. All of it gone in orange and black plumes. "They were here," she whispered, "waiting for us." Elijah didn't say anything at first. He was watching the tree line, searching for movement. No figures, no footsteps, just the fire and the quiet echo of loss. But then, tracks, faint, leading away. Boot prints headed toward the east ridge, and something more chilling. 2 sets, side by side. "They think we're still running," Elijah said, eyes narrowing, "and they're wrong." Ava wiped her face with her sleeve. "Everything in there, your supplies, the journal, the radio." "We'll start again," Elijah said, "but not as fugitives." He looked over his shoulder at the rising column of smoke. "They just lit a flare for the whole world. Now we'll make them choke on it." Hours later they reached the ranger station, an old outpost nestled deep in the woods, long since decommissioned but still structurally sound. Elijah had stumbled on it years ago and kept it marked on every map since. He kicked in the frozen door, checked the rooms, then waved Ava and Leo inside. "Safe for now," he said. The space was cramped, dusty but dry. A rusted stove sat in the corner and metal filing cabinets lined the walls. Ava lit a lantern, its flicker casting long shadows. Leo unpacked the last of their food, cans, crackers, a jar of peanut butter, enough for a few days. Elijah cleared off the old ranger desk. That's when he saw it, an old satellite radio tucked beneath a pile of papers, surprisingly intact. Hope sparked. He connected the wires, turned the dial. Static, then click. A faint voice. "Emergency channel. This is the base command. Repeat. Emergency channel opens." Elijah grabbed the mic. "This is Carter, Outpost 9A. I've got Kensington, alive. Repeat, Ava Kensington is alive." The line went quiet. Then another voice, calm, familiar. "Elijah?" It was Claire Harrow. "I was hoping you'd call," she said. Ava's eyes widened. "You're patched in." Claire sounded breathless. "Your photo hit the front page 3 hours ago. I've got your story, Ava, and I've got something else. Documents from an anonymous source, internal memos, transfer logs, offshore payments." Ava's breath caught. "From where?" "Your uncle's company, and guess what? Some of the deposits match dates from your disappearance." The final piece fell into place. The staged hike, the tracker, the silence. It had always been him, Victor Kensington, and now, thanks to Claire, the world was going to know. The next morning brought no peace. Elijah was up before the sun, checking the surrounding trails for footprints, listening for distant engines or hushed voices carried on the wind. But what he returned to wasn't dangerous. It was resolved. Ava sat at the ranger's desk, eyes locked on Claire's files. Her jaw was set, her hands tight around a mug of lukewarm coffee. Elijah could see the shift in her posture. The fear that once drove her had become something sharper, intentional, dangerous in its own right. "I'm done hiding," she said before he even spoke. Elijah leaned against the frame of the cabin door. "You say that like it's a choice." "It is," she said. "He's not going to stop until I'm erased. The fire was a message. The next one won't miss." Leo stirred behind them, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "What's the plan?" he asked, casual as ever, like they were planning a camping trip instead of a standoff with billionaires and mercenaries. Ava smiled gently. "We go back." Elijah raised an eyebrow. "To what?" "The ashes of a home." "Number to the town," Ava said. "To the cameras, the public. You want to beat someone like Victor. You drag him into the daylight." She turned the files toward Elijah. Claire had sent them through a secure line. Dozens of scanned documents, transaction records, emails between Victor and unnamed contractors, some redacted, others damning. They read like a confession, Ava said. "We give this to the press in person, make it impossible for him to spin." Elijah hesitated. "He'll know. He'll send more men." "Let him," Ava said. "He's losing control. That makes him sloppy." By noon, Claire had confirmed it. A news team was already en route to the town 3 valleys over. They had agreed to a controlled private interview, on Ava's terms. It was time to go public. The hike down was tense. Every crack of a branch or whisper of wind drew eyes to the trees. Elijah walked ahead, his rifle ready, Ava in the middle, Leo bringing up the rear with quiet confidence. As they approached the edge of the town, Ava adjusted her hood. People were already whispering. A small group had gathered near the local gas station, holding phones, murmuring in disbelief. "She's really alive." "That's her. That's Ava Kensington." Elijah felt the pressure build around them, the tension before a storm. Then the first reporter broke through the crowd. Ava, do you have a statement?" Ava didn't flinch. She stepped forward and raised her voice, calm but firm. "Yes, I do." Claire met them in front of the library. The cameras were already rolling, lights set up despite the late winter sun. She handed Ava a microphone. No teleprompter, no prepared speech, just the truth. Ava took a breath. "My name is Ava Kensington," she began, "and I am not dead." She held up the documents. "I was taken by men hired by my uncle, Victor Kensington. These are the receipts. This is the proof, and I will not be silent any longer." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Reporters shouted questions. Elijah stood at her side, unmoving. Leo looked up at her like she was a superhero. Ava held her ground. "I survived the wild. I survived betrayal. And now I'm taking my name back, not for the company, not for money, but because people like Victor don't get to win." Flashbulbs exploded, but Ava didn't blink. She had stepped into the light, and the world was watching. The next 24 hours were a blur. News vans clogged the snowy roads leading to the town. Drones buzzed overhead, capturing aerial footage of the cabin ruins, the ranger station, even the river where Elijah had first pulled Ava from the icy water. Hashtags exploded across social media. Number KENSINGTONRETURNS. Number RIVERRESCUE. Number TRUTHINTHETREES. Every media outlet wanted a piece of the story, but Ava stayed with Claire. She refused interviews with tabloids, rejected spin campaigns, and turned down exclusive deals. She granted one full-length interview, filmed at the ranger station, surrounded by pine and snow, sitting beside Elijah and Leo. And she told everything. The camera caught it all, her trembling voice as she recounted the moment she heard Victor's voice during her abduction, the weight of silence in the weeks that followed, and the shock of survival. She gestured to Elijah when she spoke of the rescue. This man saved my life, not because of who I am, because of who he is. Leo added, and she saved us too. The footage went viral within hours, not just because of the scandal, but because it was real, raw, humans. People weren't just fascinated, they were moved. But not everyone was pleased. Late that night, a helicopter landed outside a secure building in the city. Victor Kensington stepped out, trailed by lawyers and PR consultants. He looked furious, unsettled. His legal team scrambled, but it was too late. The Securities and Exchange Commission had opened an investigation. An FBI liaison was requesting an interview. His assets were being quietly examined. One insider leak, possibly from his own board, had given the authorities just enough cause to start digging. He could deny it all he wanted, but the image of Ava standing in the snow, holding documents with shaking hands and speaking to the world couldn't be undone. And Elijah? He watched it all from the quiet of the ranger station. Ava asleep in one corner, Leo doodling quietly by the fire. He still wasn't used to the noise of the world crashing back in, the attention, the sudden wave of recognition. But he didn't need it. He had already won. A knock at the door broke the moment. It was Claire. "There's one more interview request," she said, holding out her phone. "You might want to take this one." Elijah raised an eyebrow. "From who?" She grinned. "The president." He stared. She nodded. "You're not just the man who saved a billionaire's daughter anymore. You're the man who showed the world what courage looks like." Elijah looked over at Ava, sleeping peacefully at last. He didn't care about cameras or headlines, but he did care about one thing. That somehow, in a world full of power plays and cold betrayals, they had found something real. And no one, not even Victor Kensington, could burn that down. 2 days after the broadcast, Ava sat in a hospital bed beneath crisp white sheets, sunlight cutting through the blinds. Not the sterile suite her family had prepared, but a standard room she had requested herself. No personal guards, no lawyers, no marble floors or designer floral arrangements, just peace. Across the room, Elijah sat in a chair built for discomfort, arms crossed, watching the door like it might attack. Leo sat at the edge of the bed, kicking his legs and showing Ava his latest sketch, a drawing of her standing between two trees, arms wide, cape flowing. "You made me a superhero again," she said softly. "You always were," Leo replied. Elijah rose when the doctor entered. Ava's vitals were stable. Her blood work showed signs of prolonged stress, some internal bruising, but she would recover. She already was. Later, when the doctor left, Ava turned to Elijah. "I want to see him." Elijah's expression didn't change. "Who?" "My father. He's here." Claire arranged it. Elijah nodded. Ava hadn't seen her father since before the staged retreat, when he was still lucid, still a man of his own mind. Now he was slipping, the early stages of dementia beginning their slow unraveling. A few hours later, 2 nurses wheeled in on a quiet, silver-haired man. He looked smaller than Ava remembered, but when he saw her, something shifted. "Ava." Her throat closed. "Hi, Dad." He blinked, leaned forward. "I knew you'd come home." Ava took his hand. "I never wanted to leave." Elijah watched from the corner, his eyes meeting hers. There were no cameras in that room, no scripts, just family finding its way back. And for a moment, even with the world watching, the only thing that mattered was this. A week after the hospital visit, life returned to something that almost resembled normal. Elijah and Leo stayed in the town longer than planned, waiting for Ava to be released. The days were slower now, quieter, but not idle. Claire's investigation was ongoing. Victor Kensington had gone silent. The SEC had frozen several accounts. Ava's legal team was assembling evidence. But none of that was the focus for Leo. He had a bigger event coming up. His school's winter art show. It was the first time he'd ever submitted a full project. And for once, it wasn't just about drawing monsters or engines. It was about telling a story. He'd drawn what mattered most. A girl in the river, a man jumping in, a bear in the background, a fire, a cabin, a trio standing together in the snow, hand in hand. The caption, "How I Got My Family." Ava showed up just before the show began, walking slowly, but on her own. She wore jeans, boots, and a scarf Leo had picked out. When she saw the drawing, she stopped. Elijah waited, hands in his pockets, unsure what she'd say. But Ava only whispered, "He sees us." "Better than most adults," Elijah replied. The applause at the end of the show was for all the kids, but Leo didn't seem to mind when Ava hugged him and whispered, "You're the bravest artist I know." Later, when the teacher asked if Leo had any family members to thank for their support, he pointed without hesitation. "My dad. And Avenue She's ours." No one in the room questioned it, because no one needed to. The emails started arriving days after Ava's reappearance. Sponsorship deals, book offers, TV appearances, even a movie pitch. One company offered 7 figures for the rights to her story, complete with casting suggestions. Ava read each one, then slowly deleted them. Elijah didn't say much, but one night as they sat on the back porch of a rental cabin, he asked, "Not tempted?" Ava smiled. "To sell my life to the highest bidder. To control your version of it." She thought about that. "I'm not interested in a version," she said. "I'm interested in the truth." The only offer she didn't delete came from a small, independent foundation focused on trauma recovery. They asked her to speak, anonymously if she preferred, about survival, not as a celebrity, as a person. She said yes. Meanwhile, Elijah was approached too. A major car manufacturer wanted to sponsor his hero story, use his image, America's mechanic. He refused. They offered again, twice the price. He still refused. "What would I even do with that money?" he said. "Buy a house I wouldn't live in, a car I wouldn't drive." He looked at Leo, then Ava. "I've already got everything I want." She didn't say it then, but she knew exactly what he meant. Ava hadn't set foot in her family's estate since before the disappearance. It loomed like a monument, all polished marble and empty echoes. Elijah drove them there reluctantly at her request. Claire was already waiting inside, along with a legal team and Ava's father, sitting quietly, wrapped in a blanket, sipping tea. Victor was absent. He'd fled the country. Interpol was now involved. Inside the great hall, Ava stood before a wall-sized oil painting of her family, her parents, her brother, herself, perfectly posed, perfectly false. She stared at it in silence. "I don't want this life back," she said finally, "but I want it to mean something." In the study, she signed a document that formally renounced her claim to the Kensington Corporation, not out of defeat, out of freedom. Her father nodded slowly, still lucid enough to whisper, "You're stronger than any of us ever were." Later, before they left, Elijah noticed Ava staring at a small music box on the mantel. He picked it up and handed it to her. "Take it," he said. "It's not mine," she replied. "It is now." That night, as they drove back, Ava opened the music box in her lap. The song was off-key, a little broken, but it was still beautiful. The cabin by the lake, newly rebuilt by volunteers and donations, stood empty when they returned. But it felt different this time. It wasn't a hideout anymore. It was the beginning. Elijah chopped wood while Leo made tea. Ava sat on the porch, watching the lake ripple. When Elijah joined her, they sat in silence until she finally spoke. "I'm scared." He nodded. "So am I." "Not Victor or the press. I'm scared of what comes after." Elijah understood. The adrenaline had faded. The noise had settled. Now came the quiet work, rebuilding lives, facing feelings that couldn't be outrun. "I don't want to be a symbol," she said, "or a story." "Then don't," he said. "Just be Ava." She turned to him. "And what if being Ava means wanting something more?" He looked at her, truly looked, and saw not a billionaire's daughter or a survivor, but a woman who'd walked through fire and was still standing. "What do you want?" She didn't hesitate. "This. Here, you, Leo, a place I belong." Elijah said nothing for a long moment. Then he took her hand. "You already do." She smiled, tears in her eyes, and for the first time in her life, Ava Kensington felt like she was home. Snow had started to melt by the time Ava stood at the threshold of the newly built garage next to Elijah's cabin. Sunlight gleamed off the corrugated metal roof, warming the frozen ground in patches. Inside, the scent of sawdust and engine oil mingled with fresh paint and potential. Elijah had spent weeks rebuilding what was lost, not just the garage, but the life within it, piece by piece, nail by nail, just like he'd rebuilt himself years ago after Maria's death. But this time, Ava had helped. She wasn't just a guest anymore. She was part of the work, part of the home. Ava stepped through the wide bay door, holding something wrapped in cloth. Elijah looked up from where he was tightening a bolt on the workbench. "What's that?" he asked, wiping his hands on a rag. "A favor," she said. "Returning one." She unwrapped it carefully, a set of tools, vintage, polished, each piece engraved with initials, E.C. Elijah frowned. "These were my grandfather's," she explained. "He gave them to my dad. My dad gave them to Victor, and Victor put them in a locked case like they were museum pieces." She looked him in the eye. "They should be used by someone who knows what real work means." Elijah swallowed, visibly moved. He picked up the wrench. It felt right in his hands, balanced, familiar, solid. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything, Ava replied. Just promise me you'll teach me how to use them. Elijah raised an eyebrow. You want to fix cars? I want to fix things, she said softly. Not just machines, lives, the kind that actually matter. He smiled. That's a long road. I know. She glanced at Leo, who had wandered in with his sketchbook tucked under his arm. He climbed up on the workstool and laid out another drawing, this one of the garage with Ava holding a wrench and Elijah teaching. You're gonna need patience, Elijah said. I've got plenty, she replied. What I don't have is a name for the business. He looked at her, surprised. You're opening a shop. We are, she said. You fix, I manage. Leo draws the signs. Elijah crossed his arms. That's a bold assumption. Call it hope, she said. Call it wanting something that isn't borrowed. She held up a mock logo Leo had drawn in crayon. Carter and Kensington, honest repairs, with a heart and a bolt wrench crossed behind it. Elijah chuckled. Sounds expensive. Sounds real, Ava said. For a long moment they just stood there in the quiet hum of what could be. Not the legacy Ava was born into, not the isolation Elijah had built. Something new, something theirs. Outside, birds returned to the thawing trees. Inside, Elijah finally nodded. All right, he said. Lesson 1, don't strip the bolts. Ava grinned and rolled up her sleeves. And just like that, the future started to take shape, not as a rescue but as a rebuilding. Together. The spring air carried the scent of thawed earth and something older, change, the kind that started slow, deep in the roots before breaking the surface. Ava felt it the moment she stepped into the old hotel conference room on the edge of town. Claire was already there, seated at a weathered table, laptop open, a manila folder beside her. Her expression was unreadable, calm but edged with tension. He's coming, Claire said. Ava's heart thudded once, then steadied. Victor Kensington, not in handcuffs, not in hiding, just a man with too much money and too much arrogance, walking into a meeting he had no right to request. But Ava had agreed, not for closure, not for reconciliation, for the truth. The door creaked open. Victor stepped in like he owned the air around him. Crisp suit, tailored perfectly, a silk pocket square that didn't move. His smile was thin. Ava. She didn't stand. You don't get to call me that anymore. He nodded slightly, as if expecting the blow. Claire offered no greeting, just hit record on her phone and slid it to the center of the table. Victor's eyes flicked to it. Legal? Claire shrugged. Truthful. He sat across from Ava. You've made quite the spectacle. You tried to kill me. I tried to protect the company, he said flatly. You were a liability. Still are. Ava leaned forward, voice low. I'm not afraid of you anymore. He didn't flinch. Fear isn't necessary. Logic is. You've upended $1 billion corporation, dragged our name through the mud, and for what? Some fairy tale life in the woods with a mechanic and a child. Ava's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. For something real. Victor laughed once, hollow. Real won't keep you safe, or wealthy, or powerful. I don't want power. I want peace. And you don't get to decide what that looks like for me. Claire slid the folder across the table. This is everything we have. The transactions, the fake security contractor, the offshore transfers, the anonymous tip. It came from someone inside your board. Victor's jaw tightened. You can't stop it, Ava said. You can only decide how much you want to lose. Victor stood slowly. You'll regret this. Ava stood too. I did, for months. Every time I thought I wouldn't survive. Every time I saw Leo wonder if I'd ever stop shaking. Every time Elijah stayed awake so I didn't have to be alone in the dark. Her voice cracked then, but she kept speaking. But not anymore. You don't control my life. You don't get to be the end of my story. Victor's stare lingered a moment too long, as if trying to find some last crack in her armor. He found none. He left without another word. When the door shut, Claire looked at Ava. You okay? Ava sat down, shoulders shaking, but her hands were steady. I think I am. She stared at the door he'd walked through, quiet now, powerless. It didn't feel like a victory. It felt like freedom. Later, as she stepped out into the afternoon sun, Elijah was waiting in the truck. He didn't ask how it went. He just held the door open. Ava climbed in and whispered, It's done. He didn't say anything, just reached for her hand, and she let him hold it the whole way home. Not because she was fragile, but because she wasn't alone anymore. 2 weeks after the meeting with Victor, Ava stood in front of the Kensington Worldwide boardroom, this time not as the missing heiress or the girl who ran. She wore no heels, no tailored power suit, just a navy blouse, jeans, and boots worn smooth from cabin life. No entourage, no handlers. Only Claire beside her, holding a USB drive like it was a grenade. Inside, the board waited, a mix of polished silence and passive-aggressive impatience. These men and women had known Ava her whole life, watched her sit in meetings with her father, nodding along with carefully written notes. They hadn't expected her back, certainly not like this. She walked in without flinching. Someone cleared their throat. Ava, this is highly irregular. What Victor did was irregular, she said, placing the USB on the table. This is justice. An older man at the end of the table, Mr. Langford, her father's long-trusted COO, leaned forward. We've already launched an internal inquiry. Ava smiled faintly. And here's the missing piece of that puzzle. Claire clicked a button. A monitor on the wall lit up. Financial records, transaction trails, security logs, digital fingerprints Victor never thought anyone would follow. The room went still. One of the board members muttered, This can't be real. It's real, Ava said. He tried to have me killed. Then he tried to burn it all down to hide it. Silence followed, heavy and accusatory. Ava stood taller. I'm not here to take over. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here so you know the truth. What you do with it, that's your legacy. Langford nodded slowly. And your father? He knows enough, that I'm safe, that I'm done pretending. Another board member asked, What do you want from us? Ava didn't hesitate. I want to walk out of here and never have to come back. But I want to leave knowing the company he built won't be run by men like Victor. Langford looked around the room. Motion to remove Victor Kensington from all corporate authority. Hands went up, almost all of them. It was done. Ava turned to leave, Claire close behind. Before the door closed, Langford called out, "Ava." She paused. "Your father would be proud." She didn't answer, but as she stepped out of the building and into the quiet hum of the city, she felt something lift from her chest. Not pride, peace, and that was enough. The following weekend, the three of them returned to the cabin. The lake was still half frozen, but birds chirped louder now. The trees had begun to thaw, dripping slow tears of winter into soil, hungry for spring. Ava sat on the porch with Leo, sipping hot cocoa and watching the steam curl upward. Leo looked thoughtful, hugging his sketchbook to his chest. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course," Ava said. "Are you staying?" She blinked. "I thought I already had." "I mean, like, forever." She paused. It was a question far heavier than it sounded, not because she didn't want to stay, but because she knew what it meant. She wasn't just a visitor anymore. She wasn't passing through pain or hiding from her past. She was building something. "Yes," she said finally, "if your dad and you will have me." Leo smiled. "I already put you in our family drawing, but I wasn't sure if I should draw a wedding dress yet." Ava laughed, startled. "A wedding dress?" Leo flipped open his sketchbook. There she was. Stick figure Ava in a bright white dress, Elijah in a suit that looked suspiciously like his work overalls, and Leo with a bow tie 2 sizes too big. "I wanted to be ready," Leo said, "just in case." Elijah stepped onto the porch just in time to catch the end. "Something I should know?" he asked, amused. Ava blushed slightly, then stood. "Apparently your son's ready for commitment." Elijah rubbed the back of his neck. "He's not the only one." Silence fell between them, warm and full of things unsaid. Ava reached for his hand. He took it. Leo watched them with a grin. "So I can finish the drawing now?" Ava looked up at Elijah. "What do you think?" "I think," he said, "we've waited long enough." That night, under the glow of cabin light and the hum of crickets, Leo added the final touches to his drawing, this time in ink, because some stories weren't meant to be erased. A few days later, Ava stood in the small, sun-warmed garage, grease smudged on her cheek, sleeves rolled up, staring at the engine of an old truck. Elijah watched from the doorway, arms crossed, grinning. "You're getting better," he said. "I only shocked myself once today," she replied proudly. Leo poked his head in. "Dinner's ready." "Be right there," Elijah said. As Leo ran off, Ava wiped her hands and turned to Elijah. "There's something I've been thinking about." "That always sounds dangerous." She smiled. "What if we made it official?" He looked puzzled. "The garage? Number United States. The shop's already got your name on it. I'd like to add mine to yours, too." Elijah went still. Ava reached into her pocket and pulled out a small ring, simple, silver, slightly crooked. "I made it," she said, sheepish, "with Claire's help. And a lot of YouTube." He laughed. "I know this isn't how it's supposed to go, but nothing about us has been supposed to. So," Elijah didn't let her finish. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her, slow and certain. "Yes," he whispered, "to all of it." From the house, Leo shouted, "I'm drawing another picture." Ava grinned. "Better make it a big one." That night, under stars and the warmth of a fire they built together, Ava sat between Leo and Elijah, the ring on her finger, the past behind her. And ahead, only everything she'd never dared to dream. Because sometimes the greatest rescue isn't from danger, it's from loneliness. And the best proposals don't need crowds or cameras. Just a quiet yes whispered in the dark. The Mustang arrived on a flatbed truck just after sunrise. Its paint was faded, the chrome dulled by age, and the tires sagged slightly, but to Elijah it was beautiful. To Leo it was a spaceship on wheels, and to Ava it was something else entirely, a promise. Elijah ran his hand along the dusty hood and smiled. 1967 Mustang Fastback, he murmured. Haven't seen one this clean in years. Not clean, Ava said. Not yet, but we'll fix it. She handed him the keys. It was in one of the family's old garages, my grandfather's first project car. Victor didn't even know it was there. Elijah raised an eyebrow. You're giving me a Kensington heirloom? No, she said. I'm giving us a project. They rolled it into the garage, slowly, carefully, like it might crumble if they breathed too hard. Leo danced around it, already drawing ideas for how it should look. Electric blue paint, flame decals, superhero logos. Ava snorted when she saw them. Maybe not flames. Leo shrugged. Worth a shot. Later, they took a break under the giant maple tree behind the cabin, the same one that had survived the fire, standing tall while everything else fell. Ava rested her head on Elijah's shoulder. I used to think I needed a future handed to me, she said. Planned, polished, secure. He didn't speak, just listened. But that was never real. This, she nodded toward the Mustang. This is real, rust and all. Elijah chuckled. So you're comparing our relationship to an old car? Exactly, she said. It takes work, patience. But once it's running, nothing beats it. Leo flopped down beside them with 2 sodas and a juice box. Can we paint it cavalry blue? He asked. Ava blinked. That's pretty specific. It's the same color as Dad's old truck, the one we used to get you out of the forest. Elijah looked at Ava, and she looked back at him. Blue it is, Elijah said. They sat under the maple tree, the leaves whispering above them, the sun cutting through in lazy shafts of gold. The Mustang sat in the driveway waiting to be brought back. Like Ava had been, like Elijah had, like all of them really. Piecing together the next chapter with tools and heart. And maybe, just maybe, a new coat of paint. That night, Ava sketched out a new sign for the shop. Beneath the words Carter and Kensington Auto Repair, she added a new line in Leo's handwriting, Restoration for Cars and People. Because what they were building wasn't just a garage, it was a life, and it was just getting started. The days passed not in urgency, but in rhythm. The kind of rhythm you don't notice until it becomes a habit. Morning coffee on the porch, the buzz of tools from the garage, the sound of Leo's laughter echoing through the yard. There were no more headlines, no more helicopters, just the hum of life stitched back together with love and routine. Elijah woke early, as always, not from fear or habit anymore, but because he liked watching the sunrise through the pines. Ava joined him most mornings now, her head resting against his shoulder, their mugs steaming side by side. The garage had become more than a shop. It was a community place now. People came not just for oil changes, but for connection. Locals who'd once only known Elijah as the quiet guy at the edge of town now brought cookies, car parts, and stories, and Ava, Ava had found her place. She wasn't a Kensington anymore, not in the way the world defined it. She was something stronger. She handled appointments, inventory, even started learning invoicing and diagnostics. Sometimes she still messed up, but Elijah never minded, and Leo always cheered. Every Friday night they'd eat dinner on the deck, something grilled, something sweet, and talk about the week. Ava called it family debriefing, and Leo took it very seriously, usually with a notepad and a sketch or two. On one such night, Ava looked at Elijah as the sun dipped below the horizon. "I never thought life could feel this full without noise." He looked at her. "You had noise for a long time." "And silence, too," she whispered. "But this is music." The Mustang was coming together, bit by bit. Elijah taught Ava how to sand panels, align the frame, clean carburetors. Leo insisted on naming it. "The Phoenix," he said, "because it rose from the ashes, just like us." Ava cried when he said that. Elijah just nodded. "That'll do." One afternoon, a letter arrived from Ava's mother. Not an apology, not an olive branch, just a photo. Ava as a child, covered in mud, grinning after falling in the family garden. A note scribbled on the back, "You've always known what was real, even when we didn't." "I see that now." Ava kept it by her nightstand. The nights were no longer haunted. The nightmares had faded. The girl who had once trembled beneath branches and bulletproof glass now stood with grease under her fingernails and love in her bones. And for the first time in her life, she didn't feel like a story. She felt like a person. Home wasn't marble and gates. It was porch steps and laughter, Sunday drives and wrenches, warm hands and shared sunrises. It was them. It was a quiet Saturday when the papers arrived. Ava found the envelope on the front porch, hand-delivered by Claire, who gave her a knowing smile before returning to her car without a word. Ava brought it inside, hands trembling slightly. Inside, legal documents neatly prepared, ready for signatures. Adoption, Leo's name in print, Ava's beside it. There was no question, no hesitation, just wait. The kind of emotional gravity that comes from choosing someone fully and being chosen in return. She found Elijah in the garage, hunched over the Mustang's hood. He looked up and knew instantly. "She's ready?" he asked. Ava nodded. "If you are." He wiped his hands, met her eyes. "I've been ready." They brought the papers inside, set them on the kitchen table. Leo sat between them, barefoot, covered in sidewalk chalk. "What's this?" he asked, curious. Ava took a breath. "It means I'll be your mom, not just in how we feel, but legally too." Leo blinked. "Can I still call you Ava sometimes?" "You can call me anything you want," she said, voice shaking. He looked at the papers, then at her. "Okay." He grabbed a crayon and scribbled his name at the bottom. "Witness signature," he said proudly. They all laughed through tears. Later that day, they planted a maple tree beside the cabin, a younger sapling from the one that had weathered the fire. Ava tied a ribbon to it. Leo buried a note beneath the roots. "Thank you for finding us." And Elijah, he just watched them, heart too full for words. Some families are born, others are built. This one was chosen. The bench faced the river, set just far enough from the bank to catch the morning light and watch the current move, like time flowing backwards and forward all at once. It had taken weeks to build. Elijah carved it from reclaimed wood, sturdy, warm, imperfect, like all the best things. On the brass plaque mounted to the center, Ava had etched the words herself. "Where the wild gave us back." They gathered there one morning in early summer. Just the three of them, no guests, no cameras. Leo placed wildflowers at the base, while Ava ran her fingers over the engraving. "I was dying when you found me," she said to Elijah. "But something about this place, about you, about Leo, it brought me back." He didn't say much. He didn't have to. They sat together on the bench, Ava between them, her hand in Elijah's, Leo leaning on her shoulder. Birds chirped, the water sang, and for a while they said nothing at all. Then Leo asked, "Can we come back here every year?" Ava smiled. "Every month." "Every week," Elijah added. The wind moved through the trees, soft and constant. They sat until the sun climbed high, then walked back up the trail, not in a hurry. They weren't running anymore. The world was still chaotic, but here on this bench, beside this river, their story had begun, and here it would always belong. The local newspaper's front page read, "Carter and Kensington opens to record crowds." The shop was a blur of movement, customers dropping off old pickups, kids running through with popsicles, someone setting up a grill in the parking lot. Ava stood behind the counter, hair tied up, fingers tapping on the register with practiced ease. Elijah emerged from the garage, wiping sweat and oil from his brow, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Leo was off showing a group of kids his latest drawing, a superhero mechanic fixing a car with one hand while hugging his family with the other. Inside, on the waiting room wall, hung a frame containing Ava's old missing poster. Below it, a handwritten note. Not missing. Found. Near the counter sat a shadow box with a scrap of river map, the crushed flare casing and a silver key, the original to the cabin. People came for repairs but stayed for warmth. It wasn't just a shop anymore, it was proof that you could fall apart and still be made whole, that you could lose everything and still find more, that the best rescues didn't start with screams. They started with hands reaching through the dark. By evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Ava stood outside the garage, arms folded, heart light. Elijah came up beside her, slid an arm around her shoulders. "We built something good," he said. "We're just getting started," she whispered. From the driveway, Leo shouted, "Mom, Dad, you forgot the cupcakes." Ava turned, laughing, eyes shining. "I've got them, kiddo." They walked back in together, laughing, hand in hand, into the glow of their shop, into the life they made. Not perfect, but real, and finally theirs.